So, this is the beginning.
The beginning.
Of a great thing.
Oh yes.
What's the channel called again? Yeah, they're
Houses of Argument.
Houses
We
of Argument.
know what the channel's name is. Of course we do.
Of course. And anyway, so what we're going to be doing is presenting 2 or more arguments in world politics, current events, mostly current things, politics, economics.
Yeah.
And then looking at the dichotomy between the forces at work in these arguments and trying to be logical and reasonable and rational and empirical on these subjects.
And just for a little bit of context here, we are currently based at Speaker's Corner. So behind you guys, there's a huge group of people discussing, as they normally do at Speaker's Corner. A lot of it is religion, a little bit is philosophy, and a good deal is politics as well. We've also got an event going on behind us here that's adding a little bit of background music. So that's great.
Yeah,
it's lovely.
They won't be here next week, I'm hoping,
But
we shouldn't be too bothered by those guys.
Yeah. The point is to bring some of these discussions out there and try and frame sort of the philosophical discussions going out here, so you guys can join us on that.
Bring a more philosophical and current element to Speaker's Corner, because a lot of the conversation that goes on at Speakers is of the historical and religious variety.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of it is.
So we're talking about energy today, and and that fits in with the environment and global warming, and how those two things can often be very interlinked. And what with the energy crisis happening across the Western world, we wanted to bring some arguments, I guess, to the fore and figure out what's going on, and try and pick that apart a bit.
Can we have a little rounds of introduction, maybe, like just to get an idea?
Chris, do you have anything to say for an opener on the subject of energy?
Well, I think that the Western energy crisis is largely self-inflicted. There is a general sort of opinion in the West that we must sacrifice everything to save Ukraine. I don't see how we have gotten to this position. I also don't see how we got to the position of thinking that the Russians aren't dicks or wouldn't do this. It's very, very strange to me. But now it seems that we're going to have the war. No one's saying maybe we shouldn't have the war. No one's suing for peace. So it looks like everyone's going to have a much colder winter. Everything's going to be much more expensive. And if you like my my commentary, you can find me on Odyssey at Newsfist.
Great channel.
There you go.
Check it out.
Yeah, we got a couple of people here that's got their own channels as well, kind of to congregate them together. I think so. Yeah, my name is Kim, and I'm joining Christian here on Houses of Argument. I'm interested in particularly figuring out, well, one of the things I'm interested in is like how much is actually due to energy crisis, how much is an excuse perhaps to bump prices up. That's one thing I'm interested in. So it could be a veil. Like some people have talked about COVID being a lovely excuse for putting in more government control. It's a little bit besides it, but the other part I'm interested in is also the ethical aspect, which has been a long discussion underway, like how ethically bound are we to try and waste as few resources as possible, and you have sort of save the planet on one side, and you have on the other side focus on human survival and focus on keeping our economy going, is sort of the dichotomy I'm seeing there. So I'm interested in getting into it and getting a little bit more clarity through other people here as well.
Cool. Mohammed, anything you want to say?
I think today's discussion is a very good discussion, and we can talk about. I'm talking in the mic, bro. What do you want me to do?
We want to hear.
Okay, today's discussion is a good discussion about the energy crisis in the West, and I think this discussion should be among normal people, everyday Joe public, and we should give a view of why.
Yeah.
So I believe it's because of capitalism, extreme capitalism, and greed of the Western hemisphere. So yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good.
Hi, I'm Tony. I'm just here to support the channel. I'm a friend of Kim. and Chris, who I respect, and we're interested in objective coverage of debates which aren't clickbait across a variety of topics, including philosophy. I'm not totally briefed on this topic. I don't claim to be an expert, so I'm more listening in. I've read Lovelock's book Gaia back in the day. I'm buying that there's a correlation between our carbon output and global warming. That seems sensible. I'm not sure who to trust beyond that because I'm not an expert, so I tend to go, I trust people like David Attenborough. Maybe I'm naive, maybe not, but in the absence of my expertise, I look to other people who purport to be experts, and I default to their kind of opinions. I'm also a fan of Jordan Peterson, who's making very different noises at the moment about we're overemphasizing the environmental problem. He's very concerned. I'm listening to him, so I'm undecided. If you want a definition of greed, I go with something like it's overindulging your wants at the expense of other people's needs. As a starting point, you could expand on that, but that's a ballpark thing. So I think it predicates on there being a distinction between needs and wants. And apart from that, best of luck with the channel. It's needed.
Thank you.
Man.
I think that's a pretty good segue into like the first topic that I'm interested in, discussing what could be the sources of the energy crisis, right? And I know it's not a strictly speaking ethical question or philosophical question, or it could be because it's sort of putting where could we place the blame on energy crisis, or where do we think it might be coming from, and what might be some stipulates. And we got one stipulate that is a natural consequence of our capitalist society, that is sort of a natural consequence of a society predicated on greed, overindulgence of your own need against others. And you could see that as, well, it has natural economic crises and collapses, so naturally there would be an energy crisis coming out of that as well, and it's almost inevitable. So would you say that's sort of where you stand on it?
Yeah, I stand, because if you look at the history of the West, I mean, most of the energy came from, let's say, somewhere else. I mean, let's take Britain. It's an island, and you can find the whole comforts and beauty of life. And this country runs, I mean, everything in this earth runs with energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I say especially this land, which is full abundance of 24 hours light, you can open your water, you have 24-hour tap water. You can open your bath and have, do you know what I mean? Your supermarkets are full and everything. But what's the cost of this? How an island which is so developed and so everything is here, but the raw material and the energy comes from somewhere else. And the energy and the raw material, where it comes from, there is darkness. People walk for water for miles and miles. There is hunger. There is so much other things happening around the world. And when we look at the statistics, we say that this earth can feed other 3 earths.
Yeah.
So like I gave you the example of America. America is the 5% population of the world, but it uses 25% of the energy of the world. How can America justify that? Because they created what? iPhone 13. So it means that if you create iPhone 13, you deserve more,
right,
and more and more. But if you are, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa or Asia, or let's say all these places, which the raw material comes from that iPhone, they have nothing. And most of the time we mark them as backward people or not civilized. But if we look at it, most of those countries are manipulated or changed by the Western powers.
True. I think I heard an interesting
I can give
stat
you many examples.
An interesting stat I heard about a few weeks ago, about half of the population, I think it's either 1 billion people or half of the world's population live on less energy than it takes to run your average fridge in the Western world.
I give you the example of Iran. In 1953, when the Prime Minister of Iran came in power, Muhammad, I forgot his second name. when he nationalized the gas and the petrol of Iran,
Yeah.
and BP didn't like it, there was a coup.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they
it's
put who
strange,
shot.
isn't it?
So it's strange when I say greed and when I say the unjust of the Western nations. I have stories and I have
Yeah,
facts and reality in the past that it happened. So in that cost,
And that's sort of what I'm interested in getting into as well, because I'm interested to see, well, is it because of the West? And that's sort of it very well aligns with like this left-wing view that is very self-critical of our own society, right? It's almost like we should be flagellating ourselves because we've been abusing the rest of the world. We're still abusing the rest of the world, and we are on the top of an unfair totem pole, exploiting other countries on a daily basis. That's a narrative that I've heard quite frequently, and I'm wondering if it's true or how true it is.
How can it be? Because the best way to bring people out of poverty is with energy. And in order to provide the bedrock for a growing economy, even of a small stature, it's providing
sure,
energy.
no, but he didn't get my point.
sanitation.
No, I get your
if
point.
the rest wants raw material for cheap, how can you get cheap stuff when you have your own people in power in the countries where the raw material comes from? But the person from that country, when he wants to do good, like the Iranian president, when he nationalizes, we don't want him, because then he will put the correct price of the natural resources.
Oh, and you're saying he got
he
got ousted by
Of course. I mean,
business, other
and
governments.
how do we know it, this narrative? CIA bring their files themselves every 30 years. I'm not saying CIA or other foreign countries say themselves that, look, we did this. I don't say. Western analysis, Western historians, Western philosophers and thinkers, they say it. Look, we did this. Yeah. So that's how I want to.
We are getting off topic.
Chris.
Your original
Bring us back.
Your original question was, what is the cause of the energy crisis, the current energy crisis? And it's very clear that at the moment, it is a result of, number one, the sanctions against Russia, and number two, recklessly pursued green policies, right? Now, I have to take issue with your comment that all Western energy policy is based upon the exploitation of foreign countries. It doesn't have to be that way. The entire Industrial Revolution in the UK was done on British coal, right? The US under Trump was an energy exporter, right? So it is not that countries themselves cannot provide the energy, particularly at the moment, right? We could use fracking, we could use nuclear in particular, right? But due to green policies, right, there has been a massive backlash against the use of fossil fuels and even nuclear, which is completely retarded because nuclear is basically the greenest energy there is in terms of like actual mining and output, the amount of land used and all this kind of other stuff, the safety, less people are killed in the nuclear power generation cycle than any other kind of energy, right? I think personally that there is it ties in with, what you were saying about this self-flagellation of the West, that they don't want to be successful. The people on the left, they flagellate themselves because they cannot fundamentally accept the human condition, right? Which is that some countries are going to be more successful than others, and you can't just flatten the curve.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you that some other countries will get progress, but progress without the cost of others. I'm not against progression.
So
I'm not against progression.
Yeah.
So you are telling me that it's okay as you said, progression is okay, but not in the cost of others. Green, they have to bring these green taxes and green, do this green, do that green. Because if we look at the progression of the West, it was on coal, burning and burning and burning, and bringing raw material like from India, from China, from Africa, and we know the mills of Newcastle and all those cities in England. We know that, we burn. But when now, let's say a country in Africa or in China or whatever, they want to get developed, they have taxes and levies on them that no, you cannot burn coal, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, and they put sanctions and sanctions because what? They progressed, but why are you not letting them as well progress?
Look, I absolutely agree with you on that, right? Jordan Peterson makes this point very, very clearly. It is totally unfair for the West to technologically progress, then turn around to countries like Africa and China and be like, oh, you're not allowed to. Now, I think personally that if your main concern is the environment, right, the way to protect the environment is to increase the GDP of those countries. Research on this is very, very clear. Once people get out of poverty, they start caring about the environment. You know who doesn't care about the environment? People living in poverty. They go and they chop down forests, they dig up whatever because they're desperate. No one cares about the beavers and the kangaroos and stuff when you're starving.
Sure.
So the way to make a greener earth is more cleaner energy. Personally, I reckon we should just be building nuclear power plants as fast as we can build them. But I think that below this is another agenda where, as you were saying, they don't really want to lift people out of poverty. I think there are certain people who very much enjoy the power dynamic, right? They want a society where there are some people who are so unutterably rich that they can do whatever they want, and they're moving towards a system where they want to even abolish the sort of the monetary, because if you have money, right, then technically there's no real difference, right? If I was given, I don't know, $1 trillion, I technically could be Elon Musk. I think there are people who don't want that. They want a class of people who can literally do whatever they want, and that class is closed. And it doesn't matter how much money you get, you can't get into that. You know, and I believe they want privileges as of unheard of. The ability to just randomly kill people in the street, literally be above the law, and another class where people are subject to very, very unequal laws. Kind of the ancien regime in France, pre-revolutionary France.
But don't you think that sort of regime can come here?
Yes.
And why it comes? Because plentifulness disappears, poverty comes, hunger comes. These things makes people to go and fight and steal and kill. When we look at the African and Asian, or let's say the popular word, the Muslim countries, because of these things, poverty and lack of like electricity and lack of just simple things in life, which the West claims that we have the right to have it. So that's my exact point.
I think it's the fact that we built that stuff up, and we've been able to build that for like 250 years now. We've been harnessing the powers of energy, making them more effective, distributing them out among the population, giving people the ability to even flick a light switch on at night, which, I mean, half the world don't have that ability, you know. And the concern is, are these this green agenda, is this green politics actually stopping the third world from growing and flourishing in that way? You know? And I think there is an argument to be made there.
So I don't think it's a binary question. It's not a green issues counterproductive or productive. It's to what extent are they being exaggerated, over-exaggerated. Right. It's a matter of calibrating them correctly. I'd be amazed if there wasn't a problem. I'd be amazed if we weren't leaving a carbon footprint which was having an effect. The question is gauging that effect accurately. How drastic is it? I can believe that some of the environmental movement may be overstating the point.
I think they have, and I think they've over-predicted as well. Some of the, and again, you're absolutely right to point this out. It is so important to be able to calibrate distinctively the differences and the effects that humans and anthropogenic climate change has had, and how we might use these concerns to try and push agendas, to use that term. It's a bit of a hard term, I think, but to use that to try and affect policy, which is actually going to probably lead to a lot more relative poverty, I think, unless we can find a way to transition onto renewables in an effective way. Because if we pull back from fossil fuels too quickly, if we listen to people like Extinction Rebellion on these kinds of topics, I don't think they've thought the actual politics of this through that much.
I was amazed how many of Extinction Rebellion didn't even understand the process of why the sea level rises.
Right.
If you actually got down to the nitty-gritty with them, they hadn't understood that. So I think maybe there's a bit too much heart and not enough head in it.
Sure.
Not that I claim to know too much, but
It's all heart.
No, I don't think it's all. I don't know. I think the truth is I don't know. Yeah. But in their favour, I would argue this isn't like virtually any other debate where you try and find the most objective middle ground and blah blah blah, because the stakes, if they're right, are so high.
Yeah.
That does change it. I think when someone says the potential stakes here are planetary meltdown, you've got to default a bit more in their favour, just as a matter of course.
And ensure that your predictions are going to be reasonable and that the policy you're enacting is going to help with those concerns and with those problems.
Yeah.
I think moving off of fossil fuels in the next few decades is going to be a very tall order indeed. Because
I want to bring a question out there, because I hear sort of an assumption, and I want to check if this assumption is here in this group, and it might be in general. Do you think that starting out, that every country's natural evolution of getting to this state, this unprecedented state of wealth that we currently have in the history of mankind, it's never been like this? It's incredible, right? And we are kind of having this assumption that we should raise all of humanity to this insane level of wealth as quickly as we can. But beyond that, do you think that coal and using that heavy pollution start is necessary to get to that point? Or with the knowledge that we have now, could we help developing countries skip that step and go straight on to, I don't know, say nuclear or gas or something that's less pollutant?
I think
something
it's been
that will
an issue that's gone
impact less.
But without influencing those third world countries, our West cannot have this lifestyle. Our West can, America
No,
cannot.
but I kind of want to bring it back to that part of the question there. Do you think it's necessary to go through a coal stage for a country to become developed in the first place,
I think it's,
or a
you
solid
have
or
to
a
look
fossil
at
fuel state?
Yeah.
So, the fundamental problem you have with this conceptualization of this question, right, is that you are taking, say, African countries, okay, that don't have a technological base, and you are gifting them this technology. And underlying that is the assumption that their governmental systems and their people will produce the same kind of society. Now, I know it's very, very trendy to blame everything in Africa on the West, but this is just unsupportable on the facts. The West has spent an ungodly amount of money in Africa, something like 50 times what we spent on the Marshall Plan,
Are you
right?
serious?
Yes. And there are deeper problems in Africa than just lack of technology or lack of resources, right? Political systems, tribal warfare.
Corruption is a thing,
I know a politician in Kenya who talked to me at length on this, that a big problem in Africa is essentially intertribal warfare.
I say that's the arrogance of the white man. You know that.
Well, then why did...
Reactionary situation.
If it's...
reality. Look, he said. Look at the argument. Look at the argument.
Hold it. You just keep banging, it seems to be, a single drum, which is reactive. If the question is how do we deal with the problem, you've got to get proactive as well. Now, if we grant you the West's history is not good, if that's a given, and now we're trying to say how can we work our way out of the problem that we're in a way which is as fair globally as possible? If you
Do not interfere.
Do not interfere. Well, I think, what's your definition of interference?
Interfering when a nation is a sovereign state nation, and if a leader rises and it's against your ideology or your philosophy of the world, you get rid of him.
I think you're failing to embrace the bigger question.
No, this is the bigger question.
No, it isn't. It just isn't.
Does it happen
The fact that
everywhere?
you've
Has that happened to
localized it
every
means you're not.
say African state?
Yes,
Everyone.
yes.
I'm not sure if it has to every
See,
single
this
one.
technology that the West has created, why the West is now getting closer, and this war in Ukraine. You have to look at the politics side of this America that what we call this superpower that dictates from how many before the Second World War, America was nothing, nobody. They didn't want to get involved with nobody. When the Second World War happened, and after that, when America emerged as a superpower, the way they kept and then the way they lifted themselves was to maintain power and become developed. See, development needs energy. Energy means raw material. Raw material did not appear in America, everything.
Energy is probably the most important component to become wealthy, right? Because money is a thing, but money is a concept. It's like something we've agreed on.
That happened in 1974.
Is your resources
when
and your level of energy.
Dollar the reserve currency. Yes?
Sorry, repeat that again. I was finishing a sentence. What have you got?
I'm sorry if I...
I didn't hear what you were saying because I was going through.
Go on.
What do you see I'd like to ask the panel the question, what do you see the relationship between currency and energy? Because I was noticing in the conversation.
Wow, okay. That's a big question.
Well done.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that look.
I was just finishing my point.
Yeah.
When I say that now the world,
we'll get on to that.
this technology that we know now everywhere in the world, in sub-Saharan Africa, somebody can have a mobile, go to internet, and learn things.
Sure.
And know about history.
Sure.
Know about people's behavior and everything. When I think this energy crisis happened for a long time, but now we are realizing, and the war is happening in Ukraine to float the dollar.
I agree. It's probably been long underway. Yeah.
Look, what's China proposing? China has created this nation of states that called the BRIC nations. Yes.
Oh yes.
BRIC nations policy is that your value, the value of your money, is with. It should be not with dollar. It should be with your fossil fuel.
Right.
Okay.
Imagine if I'm Africa.
Products,
Imagine if I'm Africa and somebody's offering me this. Why would I sell my energy so cheap to America when I can be valuable than dollar? So America does not like when you sit in the seat of power. As I say, we as human beings normal. We lie in our life for our own good.
Wait.
We do things wrong.
The
one who sits in the seat of power, the politician.
Look, man, have you never heard of OPEC?
Yeah.
Do you even know what OPEC is?
Is there some?
OPEC is not owned by the Americans, right? OPEC is owned primarily by the Middle Easterns. They set the price of energy, right? Because of OPEC, there was a massive energy crisis in 1973, I believe, because of the Arab-Israeli war.
Yeah, look what OPEC is saying to America. The first time in 80 years.
Right, but that contradicts your argument entirely, right? Your basic argument is that the West sets all this policy, right?
Wait.
OPEC sets the policy.
You're not getting my point. I'm saying the nations where the raw material is coming, they are getting aware of their value now. Now what they want to do, they want to talk tough with America. They want up more price. But the West wants the price cheap because we are used to cheap prices. Everything made in China, my brother. Nothing is made here.
Wait, are you saying that the buyer wants something cheaper and the seller wants to sell it dearer? What a freaking revelation. Oh my God, basic economics, ladies and gentlemen.
No, wait.
Of course, who buys wants it cheaper and who sells wants to sell more expensive.
My point. I'm saying Africa is now getting aware. Middle East. Bin Salman, in his interview with CNN, in 100 years of Saudi being the ally of America, for the first time, Saudi said to America, we don't care.
We'd all
I'm saying those states, those countries was providing cheaper energy to the West.
Yeah, they're becoming aware of their value.
Cheap stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Now they're getting aware of their value that no, we can get top dollar.
Copy that.
We can get more money.
Can I add a little?
For the West now energy.
Can I add a little?
I am getting your point, right? I don't think you understand basic economics. Okay, look, if I buy,
there's nothing to laugh about.
If I buy,
I don't know.
If I buy 100 barrels of oil, right, at a set price, okay, and I make $10 a barrel, okay, right? So I make like $100 off that 100 barrels of oil, right? And then you jack the price to 120, and I can only afford 40 barrels of oil. You make less money, right? Saudi Arabia has been massively enriched by the oil trade, and they have sold millions and millions of barrels of oil, not just to America, but all over.
Cheap oil.
Cheap according to who? Who sets the price? The price is set by the market. You're just talking about a global market intervention.
Yeah,
With
who
all
sets the
kinds of
market?
producers that are willing
Who sets the market?
Well, the people who buy and sell, although
Supply and
OPEC
demand.
is a cartel that controls the supply in order to influence the price.
But you're not looking that in the world at the moment the power is shifting.
Well, of course it's shifting because
So when it shifts, then the Saudi will tell America to F off because he wants to get back to the power which is emerging. China and Russia is emerging. Saudi, I told you for the first time, Saudi bin Salman said to America, I don't care.
well, you know why that is? It's because America
when
decided
King
to start
Faisal- wait,
sanctioning countries
I
that
think
they
in the
don't like.
In the 80s and the 70s, when King Faisal stood in the Muslim League and said, we have sold the barrel of oil to America cheaper than the barrel of Pepsi. What happened to him? After 1 week, he was assassinated. My point is that
His point is that white man bad.
no,
I think
white man cannot be bad. Wait. White man cannot be bad.
okay.
You shut down my comment, right, about African politics,
Yeah.
right, which was relayed to me by a Kenyan politician on the premises that because I'm white, right, even though it wasn't even my goddamn opinion, it was opinion from someone who is in African politics.
Can white be the wrong man?
Dude, of course. But
Thank
it
you
doesn't
very much.
necessarily
But
mean...
But the problem when I say the white superiority complex, that he thinks, look at our progression, look at how we progressed in the world, our materialism and everything, but in what cost did you achieve this? With the cost of other nations. If the white man and the West would have been fair from the beginning to share the wealth, I gave you the example. What?
Okay, so
What are you laughing for?
who would have been fairer? The Chinese, the Mongols, the Saudis? What
No, the
other
white
culture?
man himself.
What other culture,
The
if they
white
obtained
man- the
right a
white
global
man
hegemony, would
himself-
have been any
The
fairer?
white man himself can be fairer because the white man
Okay.
knows what is
Okay.
right and wrong.
I'll just cut through here just momentarily. Let me add a little dimension here.
Good and bad exist everywhere.
I'm getting sort of where you're coming from. I'm getting your stance on it here. I think I'm getting your stance as well. And I can see like let me finish. So basically what I want to pose to you is I think that's a very good thing to point out as well, because I think we can be very, very quick to point at Western societies. Now, I'm not saying that Western societies are perfect, anything like that, but they're often very, very easy to characterize as the villain and the ones exploiting all the others, because you've got some history you can look at there, like look at this history of exploitation. But then there's plenty of other superpowers that do the exact same thing. Or if they had the means, they would also
See,
try
this
and do the
argument
exact
is
same
silly.
thing.
This argument is silly.
But there is
because
there's another
he's
there's
selling
wait.
drugs. If I'm selling
There's
drugs,
an-
if I'm
there's
selling
another
drugs,
dimension I want to
he
add to
tells
you.
me, why are you
There's
selling
another
drugs?
thing.
Let him finish.
Well, he's
Okay,
selling
sure.
it.
No, I meant you.
Oh, me?
I'm mentioning the Western Hemisphere.
let
Saying,
him.
well, China is doing it.
Mohammed, Mohammed,
We're not arguing two wrongs make
What
a
is
right.
this argument?
Mohammed, can I add another dimension to
Please.
you? So, another thing that you got to look at, we were talking about the prices of oil, right? We
yes.
were talking about energy.
Yes.
So you can look at countries that have plenty of natural resources like Africa, like Saudi Arabia. You can
Yes.
take these countries, but then you also have to ask, do they have the means to harvest those resources? And in a lot of cases, it's no. They don't have the manufacturing plants or the infrastructure to actually harvest all that energy.
Agreed.
And that's a problem for them.
Agreed.
So that's why they have to sell those natural resources off to the side.
But my answer is, to have the technology and to go help a nation,
Yeah.
they have to suffer.
Not necessarily, but what I want to point out to you here.
Then you need to
No.
evaluate your ethics and your politics.
What I want to point out to you here. The interesting.
Well, I know knowledge.
You're not listening. Okay.
No, I know because you made a very wrong.
No. Let me try and go on here. So, if you look at this here, right?
Yes.
If you look at, you have to have the plants, you have to have the manufacturing.
Agreed.
There's technical
It's
skill.
coming from a
Yes.
certain place,
From
right?
the West.
For example, it's coming from the West,
Yes.
or it's coming from China,
Yes.
or it's coming from any other superpower.
Anybody.
That immediately creates a sort of hierarchy that simply come out of, we have the resources to do this. You have the natural
We
resources.
also build. We do help to
Sure, there are elements that we try and build up, but it
to
already
school
skews
people
the
to
power
have
But
a
I say
lot.
this is a wrong argument, because if I have a tablet for cancer, yes, and you're suffering, I'm telling you, you need to sell everything that you have, so I can give you this tablet. Is that
I don't think
human
there are
being?
Nobody,
Is
no,
that,
excuse
I
me,
don't
nobody
think that's
around
what's-
here is supporting that ideology
no,
of exploitation.
he said when
Yeah,
we have
we're
the
all against
technology.
that.
No, no, no,
trade,
no, no.
trade and commerce in these areas.
No, but
in-
that's
in-
affecting now.
energy
Now what's
industry.
happening, that the power in the world is shifting. Those countries which selling oil and raw material to the West, now they want to move towards the power which is coming. So the West, it will be the shortage of energy, because those countries want more money or their terms and conditions.
And you're in favour of that? To what degree are you in favour of that
No,
paradigm?
I am saying, why the West have this audacity that they have revelation that in any cost they have to progress.
We're not in favour of that.
We're
Why do you
actually-
keep
I
bringing-
agree,
at the
you guys are
beginning of
not.
this
Okay, so
talk-
can we
But
stop?
your politicians,
Yeah.
your industry that we are so proud of it, they don't think like you. They have made this beautiful, big, massive, mega billion companies and all these politicians. They have created this beautiful environment. I know this is look, in the Hyde Park, we are sitting from how many nations, how many different colors. They have created this beautiful environment. Yes? Bringing.
Yeah, sure. What do you want to say?
Oh, I'm just passing. I'm historian, modern historian, and I was listening to you, and I just catch. It was very interesting to listen to the whole thing. I think so. We have to go about all things and to see that we are all human beings, and we all have to enjoy happiness and freedom, sir. Whatever the race, whatever you are. I mean, you have to go about the whole this kind of construct that is we are bombarded a lot of all kinds of things. You have to go about and to see it just by human things that everyone should be free and they should enjoy happiness and life whatever they like it. So we have to go about this. I mean, I catch this. I'm a white man. We never exploit anyone. I'm from Bulgaria. We were 500 years slaves to the Ottoman Turks. I mean, without any argument, I know where you're from. I respect every country, but Saudi Arabia is sponsor this kind of expansion to enslave people. So any kind of this power, it's not about power. The planet is too small and fragile. We should stop searching for a new planet, but say this one. I mean, what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
You know, if you, yeah. So I think so. People have to sit together and to leave these differences. You are black or white and stuff like that, just to see it. Greed doesn't know race or color, sir.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I
so,
agree.
yeah,
I agree.
or
You're not
illness.
typifying it.
No, but I
so
I
the
never
thing
said
is,
that we are
because
not-
people,
we can't be
people
blind.
were exchanging these views.
No,
they have
we are
to see it
talking about the
about
situation.
and to see that every child, every adult, or elderly person, they have a right to life. I mean,
Yeah.
well, we are arguing here, but above us, they are just doing the deals and stuff. I mean, about the resources, I mean, it has to be sustainable. What I see now as a historian, I mean, back, for example, in the 60s, 70s, people were more concerned the environment to do something. I'm a teacher as well. Than now, it's more to consume and to show what you have. It's less creativity. People that come back from the Second World War, they have seen such a horrors, but they also there is explosion in creativity and stuff. I mean, and you are speaking. If you dive deeper, what they do is basically instead of having the governments like in Africa, they just left the things to the corrupt governments, and they again exploit the resources, but the people see their own governments. It's a very tricky kind of thing, but the thing is we have to go about to make a fairer, a better world. I mean, I know that is very idealistic,
Sorry,
but as long as
what
we
did you
agree
say?
on the fundamental
It's
things,
fair, a better world.
Yes,
so
sir.
how,
No, you said that in Africa something, and then they see their own government.
yeah, the thing is they're doing all kind of. Back then there was the colonial government in Africa.
Yes.
I mean, I was researching one country doesn't exist Rhodesia.
Yes.
I mean, it was quite interesting case because people assume after they surrendered the power to Mugabe, there would be more freedom and democracy. And it didn't work like that. We all know that. But I don't want to go deep into this. I just want to say that doesn't matter where you're from, resources of the earth have to be scarce fairly.
You're saying Africans cannot live in peace among themselves.
What I'm trying to
That's-
say.
He said when we left,
I
when the
didn't say-
colonialism left, they
It
brought
doesn't-
Mugabe as a president,
it doesn't
but it
follow-
didn't work.
It doesn't follow from
Right,
that,
but
that
it
therefore
didn't
Africans
work,
can't
right?
Because
No,
the influence of the West.
What I'm trying to say.
No, because they bloody tried to institute communism. There are tons of these experiments all over Africa, Ghana, Zimbabwe. Like,
Stop this kind of.
No, but what
political-
is wrong if a nation decides they want to be communist? What has got to do with
that's
the West?
absolutely right. No,
because
that's-
communism
I'm a
doesn't
little-
work
I'm a little-
and results in mass
I'm a little-
starvation and economic impoverishment.
I'm interested in hearing what our historian has to say here. What do you think the influence of the West had on that? You mentioned an African state, African country, right? You were using one as an example.
I'm
Can you
talking
repeat?
about
No,
reality.
just I give it as
I'm
an
talking
example,
about
not to
history, what
get
happened.
into
I'm
argument,
talking
but
about
just
what's
understand. For
happening.
example, United
Grass
States
is green.
produce
I'm talking
like
reality.
I would say
Just
roughly
mean equivalent
like 10% of the GDP of the world, but consume 45. How does it happen?
Yeah.
But
We need to get
I'm
a
not
bit
into
more
this kind of
sophisticated with the
this and
concept.
this is wrong.
What do you mean by
Just to think
sophisticated?
about
I mean, we
and the
actually
things to
need
go
to address
better.
the
Just people have to go above
proactively. And I did.
and
And
to go
I
up
did.
to the basic principles.
No,
Because
I'm-
now we have
I am-
actually less rule of war, less humanity than before.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the things we are bombarded by a lot of information, a lot of things, mixture of true and lies, and it's very difficult to see where it ends one and where it's beginning the other. So it's very complex. I mean, I'm researching the archives, reading the stuff, and even back then, people, the choices that they were living, they were knowing that someone would read it back in time.
They
So
were, sorry, can you repeat?
even the archives, because people read the book. I
Yeah.
mean, so you have to go deep to the root and to see the things. But even back then, people were leaving documents to show the things in different light. So you
Yeah.
have to be aware.
What do
I
you
mean,
see as being the root? What's the root of the problem?
I think so. The root of the problem is the greed, sir. That you have to be above the other human being by any means. I mean, I'm Bulgarian.
No,
we
don't
are-
be emotional, my
So
friend.
you're saying it's you saying it's
I-
greed?
I think so. People
greed,
should have
yeah.
equal
Human
start,
nature.
equal
There we
start
go, he's talking at the same
and
thing.
equality
Greed.
before the war.
Yeah.
That's how I believe.
What
in
did
it.
I say?
For example,
Same
it's
thing.
more interesting.
Well,
We came to greed.
yeah, but it's interesting.
the end, he
It's
came to
interesting
greed.
because you are. It's interesting because you are actually focusing on. You're saying it's greed, but you're focusing on Western societies. I'm not saying that's wrong,
No,
but I say you
because
can broaden
Western
it out.
society uses this energy. My brother,
All the world uses energy. It's a lot of it, but anyway, what did
do
you
you
want
know?
to say?
Wait. Do you know that India cannot grow food for themselves because of the rules of IMF?
Because of the rules of IMF.
IMF.
Yeah.
They have to produce something and send it somewhere and then buy it from somebody else.
Ah, okay.
Africa gives its 100% GDP to IMF. IMF gives them back 25% to spend on their development. 75% they charge on interest.
Interesting.
What they're talking about?
Can I take a punt?
Yeah, sure.
Can I take a punt? I think you guys know more about the politics and the figures than I do, so I don't want to overstep my knowledge. But I'm hearing a lot of reactive arguing, and I think proactively, how do you address the question? How do you deal with the problem? That's what I want to hear. Yeah? And I'm hearing
have to
two
understand the
questions. And I'm
problem
also
first.
hearing two, you've got to understand what the question is. I'm hearing two questions. One, the Western energy crisis. Two, the environmental impact and how dangerous is the environmental
Yeah,
impact. Those
definitely.
are two different questions. Yeah? They clearly cross-fertilize. And I'd like to break down which of those we're addressing, or are we doing both of them in conjunction, and then look at proactively how you might deal with them. Now, I think our friend here, who is off camera and probably shouldn't be, I don't know, do you want me to move the camera? And
Move it, please. please.
Try, but it's on a weird thing that you
No,
can't
you're
do.
all right, man. If you can frame us well, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Okay, well, you're,
If
you're
you
all
can-
good now, but we didn't get any of you.
you're not in. Is there any way to get him in?
Yeah.
That was the guy speaking.
Okay, the problem is now the mic's here and the camera's there. Just cool,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's fine. I mean,
Okay, I think, sorry, your name is?
Theodore.
Tudo, thank you.
Okay. Theodore. Okay.
I think Tudo has, you probably better come back here for now
yeah,
because
great.
of that.
You can
yeah.
be the cameraman, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, cool, thank you. If you just go to where the sound is, just move around. I agree with Tudor. I think I want to look to root problems, and the root problem I think is greed. I think the root problem is human nature. I think human nature is common to all colours and all nations.
Agreed.
Okay?
Agreed.
So I get that the history of people who happen to be white historically has not been terrific.
Agreed.
I think we all agree on that history.
In every colour.
Fine. But let's look, this is a global holistic problem.
Yes.
The global holistic problem at some level pivots on there's a certain carbon footprint that we can make. Beyond that, we may have a tragically detrimental effect on our environment in a long-term way that we can't repair. Yeah? If those are the stakes, you've got to deal with it soberly and ask, how are you going to deal with this? And I'd say, number one, it has to be dealt with globally. It's a global problem. It has to be dealt with globally. I think you need to establish a global ideal towards which we can aim. Even if it seems far-reaching, at least establish a common ideal we'd like to achieve, then ask how close to it can we get. So if you start by framing the question in those terms, then you can move down to the minutiae, because I think when you're dealing with the branch arguments, they become more reactive, not proactive, and they end up muddying the waters of the bigger picture, yeah?
I was just in Devon, just a couple of weeks ago, and there are about 15 or 20 wind turbines on a hilltop there. And my mum found out how much energy they produce for the surrounding towns, and it was a ton of energy. They're able to look after about 60. It was a huge number. It was tens of thousands of houses that just those 5 turbines were able to produce energy for, because they're right on the coast. They're constantly getting hit by wind. I think that's awesome, and I think if we can do that for our own nations, the first world nations now, and we're slowly removing ourselves from fossil fuels. Of course, we still need them because we do guzzle a lot of energy, and I think our economies do rely on a certain amount of fossil fuels. I think at the moment it's something like 80% is we rely on coal fuel plants, and I don't know about nuclear.
If I can interject, the big problem with renewables is batteries. Right? Because renewables do not run 24/7, because there are variations in wind and variations in sun. You need massive amounts of batteries to store excess power and release it when it goes down. And those batteries don't exist yet. Technology doesn't exist. And if we were to make them with current technology, we would need to mine literally all of the cobalt and lithium in Africa. And most of that mining is done by incredibly poor people and a lot of child slaves. Right? So if you want solutions, in my opinion, the best solution would be to enable small nuclear power for everyone, right? So basically normalize microreactors, dump tons of research into new nuclear technologies like molten salt reactors and stuff like that. That is the only way we're ever going to get off fossil fuels, is by having a new nuclear age.
That's a proactive response.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and this is the thing, I'm not against the whole green thing. I'm a bit sus on anthropogenic climate change, but let's just grant that it does exist, okay? The only way to stop that and not kill millions and millions of people by impoverishing millions, right? And it's always the poorest that are going to die first, right? As Peterson points out. And I am not in favor of killing millions and millions of the poorest people all around the world, right? Just so that the West can feel good about itself and be like, oh, we're all green. You know what I mean, right? That is a terrible solution.
Can I just interject as well and just say that one of the reasons why this Russia-Ukraine situation caused us a lot of trouble is because, as Chris said, we decided not to invest in these batteries, and we were reliant upon, Europe as well in a massive way is reliant upon imported energy, and there was no capacity to store the reserves that we were creating ourselves, and it was a massive problem. And I know there were at least 2 or 3 energy advisory committees in England specifically, and I think around Europe, who were saying like, you need to, as a means of preserving and storing energy, look into this stuff. Our government at the time said no, we're not going to do that. They were relying on a stable geopolitics, and of course this is not what we get much of the time. There are always going to be shocks to the system. Russia, Ukraine, and that conflict was one such shock, and Europe relied on a lot of Russian energy, and now we're still getting that Russian energy, but it's on we pay a lot more for it because we're now buying it through third parties.
Can I just make a point, right? One of the weird ironies about the situation that we are in at the moment is that this is the world that all of the globalists wanted, right? Like you were saying before, where like, a country, they make a thing and they send it across the world and then it's sent back and all this kind of like other stuff. We wanted a global, interconnected world, right? But the Americans particularly, and the globalists specifically, wanted a variation of that world, right? Where they can sanction countries like Iran, sanction countries like Russia, right? But these two ideas are completely against one another. If you interconnect the entire world, right, and then cut off chunks of it, how can you be surprised that the entire system begins to collapse? They're like, oh, we can't have nationalism. We can't have countries producing stuff for themselves. Everything must be global. And then they go around and they just start cutting chunks out of the system by sanctioning, and then surprised when the economy goes to crap.
Sure.
I find this, insane.
We are in an interdependent and interconnected economy now. Globalization has done this, and it's been in the works for decades and decades. And it's just, as you say, when we play these games, when we mess around with other countries, and I think for good or for bad, and we sanction countries like Russia. And
see, I actually agree. What's your name, by the way? Mohammed. I actually agree with Mohammed here. I think that the people in the UN and the IMF and a lot of these other highly exploitative institutions, one of the reasons they want such an interconnected economy is so that they have the power to shut down other entire countries that have regimes that they don't agree with. So, I'm not actually as far away from your position as you might think.
America is behind that, Australia is behind that, Britain is behind that. And who are these people? They are all English people. And they are brothers and sisters. America, who's Australian? He's a convict of Britain.
One of the things.
Convict of Australia is convict people. Britain is divide and rule policy. America is big brother of Britain, so it will never improve. Don't break your head over it. Let's enjoy our life, Otherwise we'll die here. We've come here to live. We are going to come here and go away with compounded interest. Let's go with compounded interest. We don't want to suffer here anymore.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for you.
I think so. It's great that people are speaking, exchanging views, because that's how democracy works. When people sit together, they may have conflicting views, but they sit and we work for common solutions, maybe in different ways. I think so. We have to catch the devil by we need to buy time, basically, to ensure that this winter and this month, the families and the industry, they have the resources they needed. So, as I was researching before, the Irish question and the stuff, I was writing this PhD for this. But the thing is, the seabed. So if you see the sea territory of United Kingdom is quite large. It's larger than the Norwegian in some sense.
You shout a little bit louder.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say, when I was researching this kind of stuff, you have to go deep on to see how much resources United Kingdom. It have more resources in the seabed than Norway. But it's about management, because Margaret Thatcher gave it to the private industries, and I don't know how much is left for you. I'm not into these statistics. It's up to someone else, but I can tell you certainly you have much more oil than Norway, but Norway managed it properly, and the Statoil, now they changed the name, is the state-owned company. 51% is owned by the Norwegian state, so they provide better. So
Nationalised.
it never have been nationalized. Norway before the oil was a poor country. It was behind Sweden. I have been in Norway many times. So what I'm trying to say is about management. They lack the technology, so they invite investors, but they hold the golden stake basically. So what I'm trying to say is you have to look, because you have the infrastructure, you have the platforms and the stuff, how much of this actually is going to the benefit of your country, because the resources are owned by all the people of this country, basically. And the government have to work for the best interest of the people, isn't it? So we have to look
which
this
people?
All of the people that are in this country. So I think so.
Exactly
No, I'm not disputing this. What I'm trying to say, you have to buy time to get the resources, and then you have to look at something much more cleaner, renewable. There is a lot of, unfortunately, even here, once I was researching Margaret Thatcher, one of my relatives met her when she came to us as Secretary of Education. So anyway, we are still facing the things in this country. For example, we were in bad need of coal, and Britain have excess of coal, and they are closing the mines here. And we were ready to pay for this above. And they didn't sell it because they want to sell the mines. So what I'm trying to say, we have to remove the politics and to look for the best, for the benefit of the people. And we like it or not, we are all interconnected in some way or another. If a unit is developing somewhere, sooner or later will come to us. But you have a lot of resources in the seabed, basically, that are exploited, and unfortunately it's not distributed fairly.
Would you favour that over nuclear? Because
I think so. With the nuclear energy, I was a child when it happened, the Chernobyl disaster, and my country was one of the.
tainted the debate. I think the history of the
No, yeah.
Nuclear powers
It's about
warfare dating back
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think so. Who is managing it? Who is managing and what kind of technology? Yeah.
Good to talk with you guys.
Check out Newsfist on Odyssey if you enjoyed this. See you later, guys.
See you.
I think this is take care. I think this is a lovely segue because there's one question I want to try and bring it to a different level. We've been talking very macro, very large level, very collective level, and I think that's really interesting. Not that I can compete a lot on that because I feel like I'm a little bit behind, but I've learned a lot from listening to people here. I'd like to bring it to the... Yeah, just move over here. I like to bring it a little bit back to the individual level because right now we're talking large scale, we're talking things that most of us here will probably never really affect in a meaningful way, most likely, or can we actually affect it in some way? What's the best approach for individuals at this point who believe in either side that we should try and raise as many people out of poverty before? That's one side that I hear. We should raise as many people out of poverty as we can as quickly as possible, and then we can start thinking about transitioning to cleaner forms of energy, or we should start on the cleaner forms of energy from the get-go. But what can we do as a person to either influence corporations or organizations that have the power to change these things, or are there like individual things we should take care of as well? Like we should, there's the usual things of like saving resources and not being wasteful. But yeah, I just want to bring that on board.
I think before you can pressure them into adopting a particular ideal, you've got to clarify what the ideal is that you want them to embrace.
Right.
Yeah, and although generally I think personal responsibility is primary and it all grounds down to individual choice, and ultimately if all of us live good lives, the net effect will be good. Because it's such a holistically interconnected problem, it does transcend just that, yeah? Unless you've got a global agreement, you can't solve the problem as far as I can see. Yeah.
Right.
So you need to know what global ideal you're aiming towards, and I told you guys beforehand what my ideal was.
Can you say it again for the benefit of the
Okay,
audience?
I start with real basics, and I figure if we assume that our carbon footprint is having some negative effect, yeah? If we agree reasonably on what the boundary conditions for that are, yeah? Then we can work, then we'll find, whether we're right or we're wrong isn't the point. If we find a reasonable figure we agree on as a reasonable carbon footprint, which we think is safe on balance for now, we establish that, and then we go, look, that's the global carbon footprint per annum the planet can make. Let's now divide that by the number of people on the planet, and that tells you the carbon footprint any individual can make. So now you wanted to know what the individual level was. Now you can look at your life and how you're living relative to your carbon footprint, yeah?
Sure.
Then I think capitalism is a sliding scale of regulation, but capitalism should enable you to trade some of your footprint with somebody else in the interest of efficiency, yeah? As long as it's carefully regulated and it doesn't become too cutthroat. But then once we've established that each individual on the planet has got an established global carbon footprint, I think then you should triage it in terms of whether you're first world, second world or third world. Because I think if you're in the first world, you've got more of a responsibility to be using carbon friendly stuff, whereas if you're in the third world, it's the inevitability of your condition that you want to use fossil fuels and so on. So maybe if I'm a first world citizen, my carbon footprint should be 20 or 30% less than if I'm a third world citizen, yeah? That seems reasonable, particularly because the first world traveled through the third world status of you doing that to get where we are, which speaks to a lot of the arguments about Western exploitation and oppression.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying there, and it's just what does that look like when you consider that, as I said at the start, there are so much more of a footprint for people in the first world against the third.
Pick some percentages.
We obviously, we're very comfortable with our lives. We work, we produce for our families, our communities and so on. When I look at this, I'm thinking, how can we just provide a base level of energies, so that people are not living lives of total squalor. They don't have electricity, they don't have lighting, they're cooking on primitive stoves, they're often using cow dung to light their.
But if
to
you
light the
embrace
fires.
this
So,
paradigm, then they get the latitude to use more,
a
a bigger
that's right.
carbon
I think
footprint,
it's-
and we have less.
That's what. Yeah, no, sure. I think it's beginning to. We're beginning to see that in the first world, and there is a lot of momentum, and a lot of an impetus.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong,
in
though.
the
We are
first world to
guzzling
be-
energy in the first world like crazy.
We're
We're
actually
living
taking
lifestyles.
ourselves. We are beginning to turn that clock backwards a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember America in the last few years have taken back. Obviously, they're the biggest consumers of fossil fuels, but they've actually rolled back their reliance on fossil fuels and began to start ticking that backwards a bit, and have been the quickest. If you look at every other Western country with the most fossil fuels actually dialed backwards. So it's pretty impressive, and I know Europe and England as well obviously are looking at net zero by about 2050.
Right.
So our houses will be
In order.
run efficiently by that time. So we've got to, what's it now, 2022, that's 28 years to that point, and we are, I'm hoping, relatively speaking, on target. Now, is there going to be enough? Who knows? And again, it's this thing of what happens if we fast forward 30 years, 40
No, you're
years.
right.
We're
I'm
still
just
going to
pitching
be.
you get a global consensus
yeah.
where we agree what each individual's permitted carbon footprint should be. If everyone can agree on that as an ideal, and I'm sure you won't achieve the ideal, but at least it gives you a compass point to aim towards, then you can contextualize your policies within that framework. Yeah?
One thing as well, I've got to say,
footprint is a good measurement. The reason I'm saying this is because trees need carbon. Actually, in fact, in greenhouses, they inject carbon. They literally burn fossil fuels to produce carbon, so the plants grow.
we can
Now,
get a lot of the stuff sorted in our country through just hedgerows, just building more hedgerows and so on. Actually, that sucks up a lot of the carbon that's put out by cars, lorries, and so on.
Yeah, so I don't think necessarily carbon might be the gas we want to reduce. Might be the other gases. Like, for example, global warming. Basic concept is like the heat doesn't transfer outside of the planet, so it stays warm. So what if it's other gases, not
right.
carbon?
I thought I'm assuming that the bedrock argument is CO2 emissions increases global warming. If you go above 1.2%, isn't it more? Then you start to get some fairly catastrophic effects, allegedly. I feel I should err on the side of caution with people who are saying that when certain people I respect are saying it, but I still think the problem's being
I think the last ice age
exaggerated potentially.
When we were in the last ice age, it was a median of 5 degrees difference.
No.
So when we were in the ice age, it was 5 degrees.
Okay.
Now we've pushed ours up about 1.5 degrees in the last 200 years or something.
And that's
like
1.5 degrees due to our input, not just due to natural fluctuations.
No, that's natural. That's the actual mean temperature. So it was 250 parts per million at about 1850. It's now gone up to 410.
See,
roughly,
Chris really knows his stuff. Chris does his research.
I think it's pretty clear that on the science level that the CO2 is actually affecting our global temperature.
It is these fluctuations. It's how much we are contributing. It's the sun, what the sun's doing. I was talking to Tony earlier, and we were talking about the medieval warm period, and then this dip into the mini ice age that happened around the 1700s. The Thames down this way froze over. It completely froze over. And now what we've seen in the last from about 17, 18, 90, we've seen a steady uptick in temperature. It happened to coincide with the Industrial Revolution. What's the ticker here? What are we looking at? Are we seeing
what's the correlation?
rise out of the cold period into warm period?
Well, I hope we all agree that this is just natural fluctuations of the temperature
It's
cycle,
how much we're putting that up.
Grapes and we can buy in this country. during the Henry days. So it was awfully warm here in this country. So from time to time the things change.
Yeah.
But I think so. One of the things is you can achieve, for example, some products they claim we are carbon neutral, headquarters or whatever. But you have to know these companies have a workforce all around the world, like India, Bangladesh, which are completely not. So you have to be aware. I think so. We have to as dirt as the whole. Like the recycling rubbish that is sent to other countries. This is but I absolutely agree with the points. And as long as people have the good intentions, do something good, I think so. We will be on the right way. We may make mistakes, but we have the faith that we want to do something good to everyone.
I think we're all open to changing the way we deal with energy, and we're all capable. I certainly think of knowing that we love the world and we want to see species and animals thrive across
You have Stone Age, Iron Age, the Steam Age, electricity in the 20th century, and now this. We still live in the age of the fossil fuels, the clothes that we wear, the pavement, everywhere is used this kind of stuff. So it's a big conversion in the whole society.
Sure.
Yeah, but it has to begin from somewhere.
Yeah.
It has to begin from somewhere. Yeah,
I think the scientific community pretty much agrees that we are having an impact on the environment and we are having an impact on global temperature. Now, the exact consequences of that is you can make educated speculation, but we don't know. That's the big unknown. We don't know exactly how
we have
it
to
is
make
going
an
to.
educated speculation.
Yeah, exactly. We have to
can't make a
assume,
model without
and
an
we have to
education.
assume the worst, right? We have to be very. But of course, that can create schisms of causing unwanted poverty in countries that we want to go through the same stage as we have, is what I hear. But what I'm questioning, and that's the question I want to bring in again, and it got a little bit sidetracked by other conversation discussion before, but what if we are assuming that it's a necessary transition to go through fossil fuels? What if it wasn't? What if we could help countries that are developing to actually skip that stage and come to a better stage? Potentially.
I think Chris was talking earlier on about how much that might cost, and how much, so many rare earth minerals are used to, for example,
I've
make
read a really
batteries.
interesting book on it.
I've read
a pretty interesting book on the untapped resources of gas and natural gas that we might have. And that oil companies and energy companies have a tendency to be very oil focused, so they only see gas as existing with other oil reserves. That's the only place that we're going to find extra gas, and it's a little bonus energy, but it's not really anything serious or something like that. But this guy here, Robert A. Hefner, he's making the case that he knows in America there are large untapped reserves of natural gas that could be tapped into if we invested in the technology to get there. And it's like this whole resource that we produce.
This is the thing with fossil fuels, like not gas, oil, that it has a side product as well. So, for example, anything that is plastic comes out of oil, not gas.
So that's important.
Another benefit
from oil.
Yes.
Right.
They're
and we don't see that often. But the gas is just for burning. It's just for fuel. But
sure.
Yeah, here's the thing. It's an interesting little side issue here.
Yeah. No, I agree. We should use gas.
There's a byproduct of the manufacture of petroleum that's actually put into a lot of gas canisters, gas tanks that feed so many of the third world. These gas tanks, they just plug into stoves and so on.
Yeah.
If we decided to get rid of that petroleum market tomorrow, they wouldn't be getting these gas canisters. It's really interesting. I'll put it up for those watching at home. There was an article on this subject, and as I say, a massive byproduct of the manufacture of petroleum goes into, which would just be thrown away, led into the atmosphere if we didn't have it. What actually goes through the third world to help what they would be doing otherwise is just throwing wood into their homes on fires and maybe cow dung and so on, which is readily used. That's actually really bad for children's health. It causes millions of deaths actually a year because it pollutes homes. People breathe it in, they get asthma. The quality of life suffers quite.
Yeah, it's one of the main concerns of using coal, right? It's got a huge health hazard, and it did back in the industrial
coal
times.
Plants, though, I think
it's
a different situation, and often coal plants are sending the waste up into the air through big funnels and stuff. What I'm talking about is right there,
right,
in
immediate
homes.
in front of them. Yeah.
They're often burning stuff which is getting taken in by young kids, right?
But even that's
I've
thrown
heard
up in
about
the air,
6
isn't that
million young
spread?
kids a year until recently, I don't know what the figure is now, are still dying because of that.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so
right.
if we can,
Yeah, so this is the thing I'm talking about. When I say carbon dioxide might not be the main factor for climate change. For example, people see gas as a more safer or like more efficient way of making energy, and maybe it's because it doesn't have the other substances in it, so it doesn't produce other gases, which the other gases it could be bad for health and well everything else. And this is the thing, when people focus on carbon emissions, I think they miss out the you can that make burn fuels more efficiently, so it doesn't have that much of an effects on climate, let's say, or health.
Will that offset, to what degree will that offset the macro problem? If you deal with that inefficient burning, then how far to the target are you? If you've got to avoid 1.5%, yeah? If that's the target you've got to hit, how much will your solution contribute to that?
This is the thing. I don't know how much we use gas, and I don't know how much we can substitute other fuels for gas.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we can substitute every car in the city with gas-powered cars. And actually, in other countries, they have gas-powered cars. My dad had a hybrid car which had petrol and gas, and but you have to build the infrastructure for example cars. But for example, for the making energy for the cities, that can be moved towards gas. But again, that's like I'm pretty sure the whole Europe is all gas, if not.
They're talking about, I think within the next 20 years, car companies are going to be coming off of piston engines,
Towards electric.
Combustion engines, about 20 years, they're being told by various higher upper echelon peoples that they're not going to be
So they're gonna
able
move
to produce those
electric.
cars anymore. They're going to be going straight onto electric. Yeah,
This
I
is
think
the
it's like
thing.
20 years. It's quite. I mean, this is
Cool.
the-
How are they
the-
generating the electricity?
This is another problem,
I mean, if
right?
you're just
And-
generating it further down the line using
they're
carbon,
still
then...
using tons of carbon, and this is one of those problems.
Look,
and
are we agreeing generating carbon is not a bad thing? There's a certain amount of carbon the planet can generate, yeah?
That's right.
I think the first world should be taking the bulk of responsibility for using clean.
I think
we should let the third world overindulge its quota initially because it seems fair. Yeah? Sorry, go ahead.
So all the points are really interesting. I'm listening quite a lot. And, I want to say every country have its own specifics. Sometimes they are very important. I mean, if you go to Oslo, most of the cars are Tesla and most electric. The most of electricity there is produced not by oil, but by dams, hydroelectric. Most of in Norway is going like that. As I can say for my country, because you say gas, because we are poor country, Eastern European country, and we use a lot of gas in our cars. I mean, now with the Russia problem stuff, we have trouble. But the thing is, I'm from Kazakh, exactly in the middle of the country. We have mountains, a lot of wilderness. We are not a lot of people. We are the size of England, 6 million people. Anyway, so above the mountain we have wind turbines. They produce 75 megawatts. We have also solar park around the city, which produces around 80 megawatts. It's increasing. So for a city that our city is like almost 40,000 people, it consumes 30 megawatts roughly, maybe 35 during the winter. So the society, how it's built here, here would be more dramatic, the transition, because when the population of Britain was growing, especially in the 19th century, it was exploding. Back then Ireland was having larger population before the famine. Even back then they need imported foods. There was a lot of these corn walls because they want to import corn and a lot of things. I am not going to detail, but the whole society here in this way, this island, is much more difficult, sustainable in the long term than in countries Norway or my country, because we have a lot of space, clean water, forest. We can go back sustainable way. I mean, I was speaking about societies. These kind of things that water or food will be transported thousands of miles is not sustainable in the long term.
Right.
It's not sustainable. So you have to find a way, because the island is quite populated. How this would be, how people would keep their way of life, and how you would do it. I mean, so that's the tricky
You're
part.
right.
Some countries would manage it because, for example, I have, like most, we have houses, we can grow our own food, it's sunny and warm. We can have a pump to pump our water. For example, here in England, I was living before in Dorset, I enjoyed planting trees. And I say we have more trees, more water, for example. I always try to fill my water instead of buying a new one. Just things, for example, I would go for something, water, life. There cannot be a form of license, salt or stuff like that.
No, you're completely right.
And you should have, before people were having horses and stuff, they were having water everywhere. Now you have to go to the shops like a desert. You see green, but no water.
Ah, right, no free-flowing water.
Yeah, so it's a little things, but the first steps, people to be aware. I mean, on every green stuff, every tree is good for everyone.
Well, you're introducing a second thing that is totally relevant, because we've got, if you're going to work out an individual carbon footprint, I think you want to look at whether you're first world, second world, third world. You also want to look at, as you say, the environment that you're in. And if you're in Iceland, geothermal is sitting on your doorstep, so presumably if you're an Icelandic citizen, that would also modify it. So I think we've got two variables to add to the equation. You start
a lot
with
of variables,
But that three is not a massive number when you're dealing with one of the most complicated problems on the planet, yeah? If we just start with the baseline is carbon footprint divided by number of people, 8 billion, then you go, we're going to agree on a factoring in a developmental level of the society you're in to your carbon footprint, and we're going to factor in the localized conditions. Are you geothermal? What could you realistically do with your environment?
What's actually within your realm of
and
possibility?
It's not like you're trying to define a mathematical precision. You're just trying to find a point of agreement for some ballpark things.
This is the thing. I don't think I agree with your strategy. I don't think it's easy to define countries as like in three stages, first, second, and third world countries. And I don't think it's easy to enforce these things and then make sure nothing goes out of the rules or laws.
Number one, I'm not saying that it's a precise science. Okay, it's a sliding scale of define, but within, say, I don't know, a 20% margin of error, I think you can broadly pigeonhole the different nations. What was the second point? Number two, we're talking about having to have a global consensus on global regulation. At some level, you're going to need shock horror, some level of one world government, and I mean that in the loosest sense. But if you're going to, you have to have global regulations which are enforceable at a global level. I think it's unavoidably the way to solve this. And I know, and it scares a lot of people. And it's a slippery slope, no question. If you go wrong on something like that, deep problems. But if you want to deal with the environmental problem, I think you need global regulation. If you want to deal with potentially the overpopulation problem, which Peterson seems to think isn't an issue, and maybe I'm stupid, but I don't see why it wouldn't be, you need global regulation. And above all, if you want to deal with tax havens, the very utilities that the worst capitalist actors are utilising, multinational corporations, tax havens and this, if you want to deal with those, again you need global regulation. It seems inevitable. Now that we're in an interconnected world, you need a global system.
Just saying quickly, demographics change when you move into the first world from the third. 100 years ago or so, we were having far more children, and it's a state of play naturally that when you live in a harsh ecology, and things often get your children before they reach the age of 10. You have more children as a natural fixture of like living. As soon as you make it into the first world situation, you begin to average out at around 2 children per family. So instead of 10, you're having 2. If we could give the whole world that kind of this kind of free abundant energy, then we have that situation. And I think the world population is supposed to start leveling out pretty soon. Within the next 100 years, it's going to hit about 10 billion, they're saying, and then it's going to plateau. And that's lots of statisticians, lots of mathematicians are saying that's about that level. So we will see a plateau.
I think it's going to be sooner than 100 years. It's going to be sooner than 100 years. But
So
also,
by
this is the thing
2100, I
I'm
think.
trying to, I disagree with. I don't think these problems, if you can even call them problems, can be solved globally, because when you move towards the globalist idea or globalist government, but it's more, first of all, it's more likely to be hijacked by nutcases who want to control things. They're just gonna hijack that system of globalist government, and then they're gonna do anything that they can do to their advantage. They're gonna use it for their advantage.
Sorry, who?
The globalist government, the people who can hijack the globalist government. We see that in our governments. We often see that, like, this person is like,
towards globalism will automatically get bad actors will end up at the helm.
bad actors would want to get into that
certainly
system.
be motivated to. I just don't think it's inevitable. I think you're dealing with evolutionary forces. I think the lines of responsibility of individuals are connected to the lines of communication, and for thousands of years, people only travel within, say, 20 miles of the town they were born in, and that was the line of communication.
Usually.
But once the telegraph came in, and then the telephone, the internet, the radio, etc., we're globally connected. That defines the boundaries of communication, and that's not due to bad actors or good actors. That's just the evolution of the species.
No, look,
so that's driving it as well.
No. The thing I'm trying to point at is right now in the local governments, which I'm sure you agree that it can be corrupt. It can be bad actors. Yes, no. Yes, but we struggle to keep our local systems, each country system, clean. How the hell are we going to make sure that the globalist system is not going to be corrupted easily?
We're going to do our best within a reasonable framework. It's all we can do.
I think that's hopeful thinking, but I don't think that's possible.
So what is your solution?
I think people should. Each
gonna have
country
to
should
give
take
our
responsibility.
We're gonna have to start to wrap up here, but I was about to summarize your point as well, but I was getting that point that there is a risk of, that world, if you get a world government, there is a risk of that world government getting corrupt, and you could put the case that, okay, that risk is so dangerous that it far outweighs whatever benefits a world government could give in terms of making more green policies or protecting our environment.
Which may be true. On the other hand, it may not be, and it may be you have to face that slippery slope.
Also,
That's evolution.
I think actually you have to make a weighing of scales. Which is the most dangerous, a corrupt world government or climate change run amok?
What about
this is
both?
the deal. I think it's
Both
important
can be possible.
I think it's important to factor in the trouble people's, countries, whole areas of the world might encounter if we roll back fossil fuels too quickly, and that has an impact on our economies. Suddenly people start, the economies and businesses start to shut down, as we may see in this country in the next few months. I think small businesses are already feeling the pinch of these new energy costs and stuff. Are they going to be able to survive winter? Is this going to is this going to unfortunately close a lot of businesses up? I'm talking smaller businesses, Obviously, it quite likely could do. Obviously, we have off the back of this, we're going to have to find ways to produce more energy or find other sources of energy to fill these gaps. It's all a balancing rope, It's all.
Should be at the
Nuclear's
top
a
of
great.
anybody seriously
No,
Not really. No, it seems like a pretty viable solution. I think nuclear and gas seem like good alternatives together.
Economically, how viable and over what timescale can you really start chugging out these things?
I have no idea about that. I don't know. I don't know about
we
that.
have to know more about that. It's like saying nuclear is a solution, but it turns out cost-benefit goes, it's not doable.
Could be.
But hopefully, if you can.
But it should be once you manage to make it, it's a very nowadays it seems to be a very safe and a very reliable source of energy.
Unless you're in a war zone, at which point suddenly it
Sure,
becomes...
or unless a tsunami hits
Yes,
the
and
nuclear
you
plant.
build it on the coast
That's
of
a problem.
country which has tsunamis, which was incredibly stupid. How did that happen in Japan? That was insane.
I'm not
But
sure
even then,
actually.
you
how
know,
that
we hear these. I mean, obviously we have 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima. When you think of these 3 like catastrophic events,
They were avoidable.
they were avoidable, yes, but they were still not met with many thousands of people dying, millions. I know Chernobyl, certainly the long-term effects of Chernobyl were not great.
Yeah, but potentially, did you watch the TV series?
Yeah.
Okay, the potential effects of Chernobyl were absolutely catastrophic.
They could have been
yeah?
pretty gnarly.
So you've got to learn the lessons, but I'm hearing, and I don't know, that the tech has improved, the safety's improved. If you don't cut corners and have the kind of corruption they had in Russia, if you do it right, there should be ways, I think, and hope of doing this.
And this is the problem.
I think that's the case as well,
Communist Russia at the time were not looking after that plant properly.
Yeah.
It was badly managed. We don't have to go there again.
No, we don't.
You know?
I want all this stuff as nationalised as possible. I mean, I'm not. The environmental movement seems to be knee-jerk anti-fracking. I don't know enough about it, but I think if it's possible to extract gas through fracking in a way using a nationalised industry which wasn't accentuating profit over safety, but really emphasised the safety, it doesn't have to be hyper-efficient, yeah? It just has to do the job. It might be foolish at this stage, while we're trying to transition from fossil fuels towards nuclear, to not use those to help middlemen.
to help getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that point. I think, by the way, we should probably start wrapping this up here.
We have to
at
wrap
least the
up
filming.
very soon. We hope you enjoyed that first episode of the Houses
First,
of
very
Argument.
chaotic episode, but it is an episode.
I'm going to stick some. You're going to have already, by the time you watch this, seen some snapshots of pieces of data and information that we would have been talking about at the time. I'm going to stick some of this stuff up on the camera so you can see this. And any final comments, last remarks?
Final comments?
I don't think we should judge make policies that quickly, because yes, there is a massive problem of unintended consequences with global problems if the solution is global, or even nuclear. I think nuclear is a good idea, but still we should be careful with anything we do.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good to me. Any final comments? No, I don't have that much actually, other than I think there's a lot of interesting points coming up here, and I think this discussion is important enough to warrant it. And I would definitely encourage more discussions like this. And I think that's the beauty of having like a philosophical discussion on something that is not normally taking a philosophical discussion on, but which is actually needed. Because the philosophy of it can tell us, well, what should we do, or which direction should we taking holistically? And I think that's very relevant.
Yeah. I mean, there are underpinning moral questions in this, and the philosophy of morality is all of these arguments predicate on the moral framework that you're embracing, yeah?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
there are deeper philosophical issues.
Yeah, exactly.
As a broad thing, I'd say...
So the countries should stop trying to dominate each other. And when you want to be a superpower, the planet is too small. And if they work together, not over each other, they may achieve a much more better result. So that's one of the things. The countries that try to dominate another power, the borders are in our heads. They are not in the nature. I mean, we are destroying the stuff. I mean, as for the nuclear, I mean, I remember I witnessed we were having, it's called Kozlodui, and it was working quite well, quite safe. But I remember when people were pledging signatures to be safe, and when the European Union said no. So yeah, nuclear energy can buy you like 40, 50 years of really clean energy, as long as it's managed safe. Myself, I'm divided on this because I have seen people that die from cancer because as a result of this nuclear disaster. Because my country was affected. So as long as managed properly, yes. But you have to keep in mind that once things go wrong, can you afford the price? So you have to know, especially if you're a heavily populated country. In Ireland, every school have these iodine tablets because of the this old nuclear station that is on the Welsh coast. I mean, I don't want to go into detail. As long as you manage it properly, you can buy 40, 50 years until you do the transition. I'm not energy expert. I know people try to say this. I just philosophically just about. But yeah, countries should stop trying to fight between each other and dominating. They should start.
Yeah, we need
Obviously, energy is such a big factor in the flourishing of humanity. And if you don't have energy, if you have access to energy cut, then your whole country can really suffer.
Back in time before there was an energy crisis. I mean, I can tell you, people just go to the forest, they cut a wood, themselves. It was sustainable. Just what we have now as a civilization, that's not sustainable. That's inevitably.
You can always revert back to wood if things go bad.
We have to live what we have as a nature, if not better, at least in what state is now to the future generations. We have to think about this.
Okay. I think that will probably be the final comment. Shall we wrap this up?
Listen, congratulations on the channel launch.
Thank you.
To Kim and Chris.
Thanks very much.
And you're a welcome addition to the park. We need this kind of objectivity and intelligence and lack of clickbait. I'm assuming you're not going to be clickbaiting this, yeah?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
We're gonna have the most clickbaity thing on this here.
We're punching each other or something, and you can use that.
It's pragmatism, right? We have to get it out there by any means necessary.
Free market economics.
That's it.
Rational discussion is what we want to do here. So
and sort of attract random people as well coming to here, or various other people coming here, which is part of the beauty of it as well. I feel.
Just very quickly, I forgot to say this earlier on, but when you the actual climate-related disasters over the last 100 years, I think around about this time, I will put this up on the screen, have fell by about 98%, because once you are able to initiate good policy on energy, you're able to master problems with the climate and build dams, create all kinds of ways to organize yourselves in a society so that people don't die from climate catastrophes. And I think that's quite an important point to make. We're not actually seeing an increase in deaths, particularly through climate-related disasters. They've actually been decreasing solidly for quite a long time. So it's just something to factor into this equation here. And with that, we're
closing off.
We're the Houses of Argument, and over and out.